I'd say the last 5 years, it's really become diversified, commercialized, and professionalized. I've been working ransomware cases since ransomware was a thing, but now you have this ecosystem, right? It's ransomware as a service.
Welcome to the Block and Tackle Show, hosted by Karl Block. He'll be tackling some of the biggest issues in business today. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody. This is Karl Block, host of the Block and Tackle Show, where we talk to people about solving real problems in business. Today's problem that we're going to talk about is cyber risk, ransomware, nation-state attacks, corporate espionage. The threats are real, the stakes are high, and most companies are not nearly as prepared as they think. My guest today is James Turgal. He spent 22 years with the FBI, rising from special agent to chief information officer to the executive assistant director of the FBI, leading cyber and national security operations. Now he advises boards and CEOs on how to prepare for the threats he used to investigate. James, welcome to the Block and Tackle Show.
Thanks, Carl. Great to be here.
No, you're going to be a great guest, and I know everybody's going to love you, so thanks. So look, this is your wheelhouse, cybersecurity threats. You know, there are other people, I'm sure, who have it in their wheelhouse, but to me, from what I know, you got the biggest boat in the harbor. So, and I appreciate it very much. But let's talk about cyber from a really high level. Technology advances all the time. The cyber threats of 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years ago have evolved. How has the cybersecurity landscape and the threats changed in the past 5 years?
Well, great question. So in my opinion, having lived this since, I started a cyber task force in Cincinnati in 2002, right? When the FBI was really starting to understand that cyber was going to be a part of everything that we did. So I've worked cyber from the inception of the FBI's program, and seeing it change and watching it change as I worked it throughout the decades is really amazing. But I'd say the last 5 years, it's really become, I would call it diversified, commercialized, and professionalized, right? I've been working ransomware cases since ransomware was a thing. But now you have this ecosystem, right? It's ransomware as a service, right? Ransomware is these ops have kind of matured into this service model, for example, right? You have affiliates, you have developers, initial access brokers, negotiators. I mean, for crying out loud, some of them have, like customer service call centers that while you're in the middle of a crisis and they're, detonating ransomware in your environment and your system is completely shut down. Yeah, they give you a number to call, and it's a call center. So this is evolved from ransoms that went from hundreds of thousands of dollars to multi-million dollar extortion schemes, right? Change Healthcare was 22 million, right? And that was just within the last couple of years. And so the ransomware landscape has really evolved in the last 5 years. The other threat actors out there, right? Nation states, I have really seen a kind of convergence between the nation state, right? China, Russia, North Korea, some of the other smaller players. But I've seen a convergence between the nation states and the organized crime groups. It's not, used to be, 10 years ago, there was a real kind of demarcation line between the nation states and how they operated. And then you'd have these organized crime groups, which operated completely differently. But I've seen a real convergence of that over the last few years, because they're now using like commercial grade tooling, and the criminal groups are really kind of weaponizing access that sometimes is procured by the nation states and sometimes not. And then as far as the insider, right? Insider threats have always been huge, but now I see a blurring of the lines with that too, right? So you have insider supply chain threats. You have nation state threat actors that are cultivating sources inside their targeted companies and trying to get the insider who's an employee to launch the malware, right? So now you've just blurred the line between what's an insider and what's an outsider.
So, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that cooperation between organized crime and some of the other countries and the growing threats. That was really, honestly, a wonderful answer. And I guess it's getting so big, why is it a board level issue now?
Well, so it is amazing, the evolution of this, I think, and I've really done this in the last 5 years. So I last week just completed my 112th board meeting, right, since joining Optiv 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, it was really hard for me to get boards to understand that this was not just an IT problem, right? I'm sitting in these briefings, and I was with a Midwestern bank, and I'm doing a threat briefing for them, and this very lovely, mature gentleman, with his flip phone sitting on the table in front of him, interrupts me and looks at me and says, "Boy, what in the hell do the Russians want to do with us? We are just a small Midwestern bank." And that's right. I tell that story because that's what I heard, right? That is the misconception out there. And so I proceeded to tell him exactly why, as a bank, the Russians, the Chinese, and everybody else is after him. And so that has it's really motivated some of them because there's so many breaches now, right? And it's so media is all over them, right? So boards are now understanding this is really business risk, right? Not just an IT problem, right? Some of the more mature clients of ours are actually asking me, demanding to know and understand what is the risk to dollar translation, right? Because if we're providing a service or we sell a particular product, right, they're actually looking at me and saying, how does this make us safer? How does this buy down risk? And so I'm now having to translate what these technical aspects of the sale or the service, both, how does that translate to lower risk? And then the next question is, now cyber insurance is such a huge thing. They're wanting to know if all these things will align with our cyber insurance strategies so it lowers their premiums. Boards have really jumped in, with both feet. There's still some that, look at me and go, wow, that was a great presentation, but that'll never happen to us.
Well, look, it's obviously foolish. And what I would say, you said something very interesting that I think a lot of people may overlook and take for granted. There's a lot of companies, whether it's cybersecurity or something else, who actually do cost benefit analysis. Do I have to have 100% protection, or is there some level of risk that I can tolerate? And in terms of spending money, and people think that, cyber, every board is going to spend every last dollar of their profit on cybersecurity. It's not realistic. It's not how things work.
Yeah.
But I am still surprised that there are people who are so naive. And I mean, obviously you're on the front lines here. And the idea that this guy says, why would anybody want to deal with our little bank, as if they don't use the internet, they're not connected to a banking system, that they don't have deposits in and out of other accounts. I mean, I don't get it. But I mean, it's why you're in business, which is great.
Yeah. Good and bad of that, right?
No, totally. All right. So you had talked about ransomware and that it's been around a long time. And I think a lot of people are going to want to say, hey, what are the threats that James is seeing since you're at the front lines? What kind of threats are you seeing now that maybe you didn't see a few years ago?
Wow. Yeah. So the threat environment has really taken off, right? AI and a number of other tools have really allowed the threat environment to, for lack of a better word, expand or explode. I mean, we've always had phishing, and remember the old phishing emails that we used to get, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. They had misspellings. The context was wrong. The grammar was terrible. Right now, phishing is, because of AI, because of large language models, the phishing, the deep fakes, the ability to utilize that technology to enhance ransomware and supply chain attacks is unbelievable. You've got nation states that are now being able to, China specifically, that are able to do what's called living off the land, right? And living off the land is them, the nation state or the threat actor, actually going into, your system, getting into your network, utilizing the tools and the software that's literally on your system. So it leaves very little, minimal, like forensic artifacts, right? It leaves very little footprint. So they're literally using your own software and tools against you, right? They're modifying them as they're in the system so that all of your, antivirus and all of your, sniffer tools and all those things that we pay for, it's a blip on the screen, but it doesn't send off alarm bells because they're actually utilizing your own system against you. All of those tools, all of those memory resident tactics. And so that is really taken the defensive aspect of this, right, in a totally different area. You've got automated and AI assisted reconnaissance, right? So AI can actually, you hear things like 0-day, vulnerabilities, right? It's just a hole in the software, right? It's a vulnerability in the software that came out, when it left, whoever designed it. But AI is now able to, at scale, truly just scan the entire internet looking for ports that have those vulnerabilities and find those endpoints, and it could do it at scale. And so it's generating like custom phishing lures. It's utilizing both encryption and evasion techniques. I can get into some really interesting details about there's a couple of recent ones on, how actually the AI and the large language model is engaging with victims.
You've got to give an example of, how skilled they are at doing that. I think that nobody would actually think about the level of sophistication for something like that.
Yeah, it's to the point where they're utilizing. So Claude was actually utilized by the Chinese to attack a number of different companies. And so not only was the AI used to scan for the vulnerabilities, right, scan for those holes in the software, but once they got access to the networks, threat actors on the other side of that keyboard they're communicating with the AI, they're communicating with Claude and saying, hey, I need you to identify all of the assets, within the organization. I want you to put all of the data in 4 or 5 areas that you determine. Usually there's a large amount of data flow from it. So you're trying to hide what would be the exfiltrated data in these large repositories. So the AI is figuring this out real time, searching through the system, right? And the Claude identifies, hey, this network has 2 or 3 tools that are trying to locate us, and it will actually change how it's operating within that network in real time to try to obfuscate itself, or what we call polymorphism, morph itself into looking like another different type of software so that your tools don't get at it. And then it finds what you want and it slowly extracts it out. And the threat and the poor victims never knew they were in there.
That is incredible. And if they don't leave a trail, how do you even know you've been breached unless they publish data or blackmail you or something?
Yeah, and that's just it, right? It's the double, triple extortion, right? They encrypt the data, they exfiltrate the data, they come back if you don't realize it, because that is happening at an alarming rate now, right? Then they threaten DDoS attacks, or they extort your customers or your supply chains. It's really getting active out there.
When you walk into a boardroom, I bet you there's a lot of people who just don't even grasp how deep, how sophisticated the attacks are, how they're growing, and the depth of things that they can do to a company to take it down if they really want to.
Yeah, most boardrooms right now, unfortunately, on the AI side, they're more concerned about the value proposition of how AI can make their business more efficient, more effective, cost savings. And I totally get that. But we don't live in that world now where you can just work the business side and not work the security side. They have to be those have to run in parallel, because the threat actors aren't stopping and waiting for you to figure it out.
Of course, it makes a really good sense. Right now, are you seeing particular industries that seem to be targets of whomever is behind the cyber attacks?
Yeah, so there's a ton of reporting out there. Like Verizon does their annual report on cyber crimes, and I'm still part of all of the information, Internet Crime Complaint Center, right? So IC3, which is the FBI's system. So I get a lot of data. I still have a lot of contacts back in the bureau, and unfortunately, right, manufacturing, right, in 2025 was the number one sector getting hit. Healthcare, financial services, right, 2 and 3. Critical infrastructure, we're talking, right, water treatment facilities and those types of sectors out there. And then e-commerce has been a huge increase I mean, they were probably eighth or ninth on the list, a couple of years ago. And now, with the Marks and Spencer attack, with some of the other attacks, they are higher and higher on the list.
So let's break down some of that. So when it comes to manufacturing, are they looking for the processes and the technology that they want to steal? Is that why they're going after manufacturers?
Yeah, so they've now figured out that going after manufacturing gives them two things. So one, if they're able to actually get into the networks, and historically manufacturing, there was the IT back office side, right, that ran accounting and HR and all that stuff. And then there was the ICS, the SCADA, the operational technology side. That's what was running the factories, right? A completely different system that was bifurcated. Well, really hard and really inefficient nowadays to run two separate systems. So we're seeing these manufacturers actually combine those networks and into newer, more efficient ones. Well, that gives threat actors not only the back office IT, personally identifiable information and all of their accounting and all their supply chain, but it also gives them access to the manufacturing intellectual property piece as to how they actually build what they build, right? So it's a twofer.
Yep. That makes sense. I'm curious about the retailers. Is it for the financial information and the credit cards? And what's attractive about going after retail chains and e-commerce?
It's a really great question, and here's why it's hard to answer that, because I've seen some that go after right, for the credit card, right, for the PCI information, and then they sell it on the dark web. But that's not necessarily normal across all of the attacks that you see. Some of them, I think it's for disruption purposes. I think there's a little bit of chaos being sown. If you look at some of the larger ones, I think that's what their motivation was. There is an argument to be made about if they're able to sell that information. I mean, it's kind of all over the board. So there's a ton of things that they're going after within these different e-commerce platforms. And it's just not, there's no trend.
Okay. Interesting. The healthcare one, I mean, I think that's going to be the gift that keeps on giving, sadly. And yeah, people's personal health information and being able to shut down a hospital. I totally get that. I mean, from what I see, and I would love to hear from you otherwise, because you're the expert. They seem to be the latest to the party on being able to be as cyber healthy as possible of other industries that I've seen.
Yeah, unfortunately, healthcare is so far behind as far as their technology and their ecosystems, right? So the amount of money, and let's face it, I mean, we understand why. We want our hospitals spending money on, the latest, technology for MRI machines and the latest technology for different procedures and processes and technology machines that are going to, cure us. Not spending it on, that what would be, just cyber infrastructure. Problem is that all of those amazing machines are all connected to that same flat network, right? That I can shut down in an instant if I get into that network. So it's not just the machines themselves, because those, want to talk about, we talked a minute ago about the manufacturing sector. Think about this. You've got all of those different, MRI machines and nuclear machines and all those things. They're all connected. They all have IP addresses, which means they're all connected to a network. I mean, how do you think they actually update the software on those things, right? They're connected. So it's not only that data, but then it's also, right, the HIPAA data and the PHI, and you have organizations, all of this data from all these attacks. One of the things that kind of drive me nuts is people think about them in isolation. Oh, it was the Marks and Spencer attack. Oh, it was the healthcare attack. It was this other attack over here of some manufacturer. So the criminal world out there on the backside of this, all of that data is being dumped into depositories on the dark web. They are buying it and selling it. They're trading it. You start to put all of those different breaches together, right? And now you have this picture. You can start to build some personas of real people, right, with all of their information, right, their name, their address, social security numbers, right, date of birth, that's easy stuff. But now you know specific things about, right, their healthcare, right? You know specific things about their finances, where they bank. That's when it really starts to get scary.
I think what you just said in my world is one of the most underappreciated things, that there is tremendous value in building profiles of people.
Yeah.
And then they find out where they work. And then I don't want to even go down this logical chain on this podcast, but I get it. And I really, really think people they just look at these things in silos way too much.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And now that example I just gave was really the proxy groups that are out there just to make a dime, just to make a buck on it, right? You start talking about the nation states like China using this, right? You create those personas when you're now, investing in property and things, utilizing a US persona, but it's really backed by the Chinese or the Russians. I mean, or some type of company, shell company. So there's a ton of risk here that comes with just that information getting out. And unfortunately, there's just been so many breaches.
Karl Block is both a corporate lawyer and a corporate restructuring partner. Nothing in the podcast should be construed as legal advice.
If you want more info on the show, please visit blockandtackleshow.com. And you can also email me at karl@blockandtackleshow.com. Thanks for tuning in.